Hello, Uta here. Whoops. With a picture from a long time ago of two beautiful young ones and the postpartum Uta about a week or so after the famous 5-hour labor. Now, this is an episode of the Heggen Lexicon. The words to describe what we're talking about in the cross-sex ideation with more accuracy. So, what happens is we get accused when we are making factual statements and when we are expressing concerns about detransitioners and when we are saying, what about the wives? Why should a man be called mother of the children that he has fathered? When we're saying logical, reasoned statements, we get accused of being in an ultra traditional religious cult, or we are accused of being in a far right political cult, or we are accused of not knowing what we're talking about, and we are kind of demonized. We are accused of hurting someone with our rational, biological statements about mammals called humans. And that I am calling Strawman Ambush. That person who is characterizing you that way, that very, very extreme negative way, is doing a strawman ambush. They are making you into an effigy, a straw effigy of the enemy, and painting symbols from a long, long time ago onto your attire, and they're getting on their high horse, putting on their armor, taking their lance, and they are going to spear you with their lance, symbolically, and make you into this enemy. And I am calling that a strawman ambush. When you accurately describe what someone is doing to you with apt and clever words, that sets them back on their heels a little bit. And I suggest saying, I'm not demonizing you. I'm not demonizing you, and I expect the same. I refuse to be demonized, and you are not going to jump into your straw man ambush. Now, that's the only word for our Heggen lexicon in this post. I am, though, going to read a statement called Reporting Principles from Women's Declaration International. I think it all just came out today. This was designed by Kara Dansky, the leader of Women's Declaration International and great fighter for women's rights, exactly what I mentioned at the beginning. And she is helping to form legislation to protect children and to protect women. And this is what they put out. It's their own lexicon, not quite as encyclopedic as the Heggen lexicon, but here we go. This is for journalists, and it is to push back against the Trans Journalists Association Style Guide, which is a web page telling us what to say and what not to say, and especially telling, in my point of view, reporters never to tell the story of us trans widows, ex-wives of men who ideate into a female persona. And they tell publishers not to publish our stories. But I did. And so did Shannon Thrace. Her book is called 18 Months. And so did Christine Benvenuto with her, I think, 2012 book called Sex Change. And all of our former husbands have a great deal in common in terms of their narcissism and their demanding ways. And so here is how Women's Declaration International instructs us to be accurate, take care of ourselves. Reporting principles. Alignment with the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights. So this is saying we want to align our language and our terms with the Declaration of Women's Declaration International on Women's Sex-Based Rights. Refer to a specific article of the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights when applicable. And what this does is it gives some of what you're saying veracity. So there are articles in this declaration, and they're numbered, and they're suggesting, say, for example, the Idaho law is consistent with Article 7 of the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights. That type of thing. When you are reporting, or even when you're talking to people regarding keeping our sex-based rights. Names and pronouns. When reporting on anyone who claims to be the opposite sex, use the correct sex pronoun. If the person has changed her or his legal name, use the new legal name and include a reference to the person's previous name. For instance, Rachel, formerly Richard, in parentheses. I like this. Using they or their as a singular pronoun. They refers to a group of more than one individual. When they is used as the personal pronoun of someone whose sex is known, this usage obscures reality and creates confusion. People who call themselves non-binary often insist that they be used in place of a sex-based singular pronoun. Instead, and it's in bold, always refer to an individual using an accurate sex-based pronoun. Use her or his where someone's sex is not known. You can usually tell. Use of qualifiers. Biological as a prefix, as in biological women. Now, I feel that I have to sometimes say biological or natal women, and I do that in my writing at utaheggengrasswidow.wordpress.com. And I think this is an interesting point. I think it's sometimes so confused and chaotic that we do have to make it clear that we're talking about biological women, but they are saying to qualify a person's sex by adding biological implies that there is another kind of person that is that sex. Simply use the accurate sex-based word to refer to each person. Woman, man, girl, boy. How simple. Oh, pet peeve of mine. Cisgender or cis woman, cis man. No. Capital N, capital O. To qualify a person's sex by adding cisgender or cis implies that there is another kind of person that is that sex. Simply use the accurate sex-based word to refer to each person. Woman, man, girl, or boy. Now, interesting next point. Feminist feminism. Yes, all in caps, Y-E-S. Feminism is a political advocacy movement for the liberation of the sex class, women. However, there are disagreements about what constitutes liberation. For this reason, it is a good idea to add a descriptor or qualifier to note which sect, S-E-C-T, of feminists you are referring to. Those who promote the idea that some men or women should not be referred to as feminists. It's so crystal clear. I love it. Perspective. Naming the perpetrator. When reporting on violence against women, avoid using the passive voice, which erases men as perpetrators and obscures reality. Put the perpetrator in the active role. Uh, yes, we have to say in the active use of the verb, such as men who assault, instead of the victim was assaulted. The victim was assaulted is passive voice, and it's best to say the name of the perpetrator and then the active verb, so and so assaulted this woman, and so on. Correcting misrepresentations. It is common to find headlines that confuse readers about the content of the story. For instance, it is common for reporters to write that a man who says he's a woman is a woman when he has committed a heinous crime, and that a man who says he's a woman is a trans woman when he's been victimized. Always report on stories involving incidents of male violence consistently with this manual. Clearly identify a male perpetrator as a man or a boy in the case of minors, and refer to men as men using the correct sex pronouns. And that's it. So I'm going out for a walk after this. And we are making progress. Norway is not going to just go along with WPATH and medicalize children anymore. Sweden, Norway, Finland, the UK. That's progress. This is what has to happen. And we have several states in the US that are making those decisions also. I think working on this with those states, I think WDI, Women's Declaration International, figured out how important it is to have clear language. I'm noticing that in the studies, some of which I've published on utaheggengrasswidow.wordpress.com, often there's very confusing language in the way a science study is written up. And we need to go back to the way that makes sense. So be well in mind and body, always.